Today on CityCast Houston, it's been a week since Hurricane Beryl ripped through the city of Houston, and we're now learning about the impacts on businesses that have had no power since Monday of last week. Plus, I know it's hot and we're all frustrated, but can we not take it out on linemen? And we remember Houston Chronicle columnist and my dear friend Ken Hoffman. ABC 13 reporter Pooja Lodhia joins me to talk about those stories and more. It's Tuesday, July 16th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Pooja, what's up? Welcome back into CityCast Houston. How are you?
I am so happy to be here. You know, I love your podcast and I love what you do. So thank you.
Thank you so much. The entire team works so hard, and to hear all the kind words, especially after last week, we were working overtime trying to get content out, and I know you were as well. How's everything been for you? I know you got power back Sunday night. I know it's been so hard for so many, but how are you dealing with everything?
You know, I'm doing fine. I didn't have power for 6 days, but, you know, I know even as we speak, people are still out of power. I had somewhere to go. I stayed at a friend's place, so it wasn't so bad for me, but wow. I mean, just talking to everybody in this city, people are exhausted, and I don't blame them at all. I mean, people are still recovering from the last few storms. So I feel like I'm tired, and everybody I talk to is just tired.
Yeah, we really are. And we've been talking about CenterPoint's response and recovery efforts to restoring power, all that good stuff. But one angle that we haven't talked about, Pooja, is the impact on businesses. Like, for example, my dad, he owns a perfume store on Harwin. He just got power back on Monday morning, and he was unable to open his store. And he tried to open it with no power, and his employees couldn't come in because they were without power. So that's a week worth of business not being done. And this is an impact that's being felt by thousands of businesses. And I know you reported on this. Tell me about what is happening.
It really is sad when you think about how many people are out of work due to this storm. People who desperately want to go to work and are just unable to. You really have to feel for a lot of these business owners. I mean, restaurants are unable to open. Stores, like you mentioned, your dad's perfume store. I actually did a story on one of your favorite places, Raheel. I know you like this place, Raja Sweets.
Yes.
I was there last week, and, you know, the owners are just this lovely family, and you got to consider what they're going through. The girl who is running the place, Sharon, her mother is going through cancer. Her sister has a disability. They didn't have power for 5 days. At home, they didn't have power at their restaurant either, and they did not have a generator. When I showed up to their restaurant, there were people in the back just throwing away pallets of food, pallets of ingredients. It's just depressing. And there's nothing they can do because they're too afraid, obviously, to serve any of that food. They don't want to deal with any of those ingredients that could have been ruined. And all of the employees who they employ, people who really depend on that restaurant to stay afloat, had not been working for a week.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so tragic what happened in regards to the power outages. And look, it's going to happen after a hurricane, after any storm, you know, that has that much wind. There's going to be outages, but the response and the recovery efforts has impacted so many from an individual level to the business level. I was talking to my friend Earl, who repairs fences, and I've used him forever. And obviously right now it's a busy time for him, right?
Sure.
But because so many businesses are closed, he's not able to find all of the materials he needs. In addition to that, he is trying to just get his life going because they are without power and they're just getting back to the groove of things. His family is. So it's just an impact that's going to be felt for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I know there's assistance out there. We're going to talk about that in a second. But as you mentioned, the employees of these businesses, I mean, they can't go to work and they can't make a living right now.
Right. It really is sad because I think a lot of, especially restaurants, people are paid hourly. So they are not paid with a salary. And you got to feel for the owners, too. They can't obviously afford to pay their employees when the restaurant isn't working, isn't open. I'm actually curious to see what happens in terms of lawsuits. I know I just saw that Tony Busby is filing lawsuits on behalf of restaurants here in the Houston area as well as Galveston. I'm curious to see what happens with all of that. Those lawsuits are against CenterPoint Energy, basically saying it was your responsibility to keep the lights on. We did everything right. We did what we needed to do, and now we're unable to work. I mean, you got to figure some of these restaurants are not going to make it through this. Think of what restaurants have been through. They went through COVID. They went through all of these just disasters, and now they're going through this. Some of these restaurants are going to stay closed for 2 weeks.
Yeah, think about that. Winter Storm Uri, they were without power for a while as well. The derecho, some impacts were felt for a week as well. And now this, I mean,
Right?
It's devastating. There's no other way to put this on what this is doing to the Houston community. And by the way, if you do have business losses or you know somebody that does, and that includes property damage and economic losses, you may qualify for assistance from the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA. They offer low interest loans to small business owners and individuals to cover costs after a disaster. We're going to link that information in our show notes so you can learn a little bit more. And hopefully you do get something back, because this is just a hard time for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I hope a lot of these business owners really take advantage of some of these programs that are available to them. But I got to say, I wish I could be more positive about it, but we all know that it is difficult even getting that assistance. We know there are people still waiting for assistance from the derecho. There are people waiting from Tropical Storm Alberto, which was even in between that time. So we know that it's not like when you apply for these loans, which you should apply for them, you don't get that money right away. So really, it is a difficult process no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, and as we, go through this recovery mode, more than 2 million people now do have power, which is good. That's about 90% of the people who were without power. They're back online by Monday evening. But that wasn't good enough for Governor Abbott. I don't know if you saw this or not, but he is back from his trip to Asia. And in a press conference on Sunday, he said, quote, CenterPoint must specify actions that it will take in the coming months that it did not take in Beryl that will reduce or eliminate power outages in the event of another tropical storm arriving at the Gulf Coast, end quote. But the statement that everybody is talking about, Pooja, is when Governor Abbott said, maybe they have too large of an area for them to manage adequately. It's time to reevaluate whether or not CenterPoint should have such a large territory. So there is some action coming down the pike.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens, because I think right now people in our area are so angry. They are demanding accountability. They are demanding that our elected officials do something. But we've seen this before, right? And not all that much happens sometimes. So it'll be really interesting to see if this fades, or if Governor Abbott, the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, if these elected officials really keep that pressure on and continue to really make a thing out of this. Because again, I think one of the things that we see here in Houston, because we are a city that unfortunately goes through a lot of these weather events, I think sometimes we see that exhaustion just kind of fade. We talk about Houston strong, people kind of move on, and then the next weather event happens. So I'm really interested to see what happens if this kind of pressure holds on and makes a big difference when it comes to elections, when it comes to CenterPoint, when it comes to our public utilities. I mean, there are changes that can be made, but there needs to be the will to do so, and that will needs to stay.
I was thinking about this during Hurricane Ike. There were over 2 million people without power here in the city of Houston as well. And it took up to a week, if not more, for a lot of people to get their power back. So we've been through this before, but I think the mindset of where Houstonians were in that storm and now in Hurricane Beryl, it is important, right? Because Hurricane Ike, you got to think about, it was in 2008. You still had the images of Hurricane Katrina. You're thinking about the threat of, this is what happens during a storm. And this is going to take some time to recover. And people were frustrated. I'm not saying they weren't, but I think we were a little bit more accepting of the timeline from CenterPoint at that point. But you think about Hurricane Beryl, because of the derecho that you mentioned, we're fed up. This was 6 weeks ago and nothing has improved. And maybe 6 weeks isn't enough to improve your response, but maybe you could have planned a little bit better. So that mindset also plays a role in this, why everyone is so exhausted and frustrated.
Absolutely. I think it makes a big difference that we have been through just weather event after weather event. I mean, you know people, right, who have bought groceries for their refrigerator. The power goes out again. They throw out everything in their refrigerator. Then they do it again a week later. I mean, I think we've had too many of these events back to back to back.
Yep.
And I don't know that we have really had that kind of communication from CenterPoint or from our elected officials to where we trust that this isn't going to happen again soon. I think one of the things that we hear from people, and I know I just got my power back on Sunday. You don't get a lot of communication from CenterPoint, from anybody on when it's coming back, when things are going to improve. And that's really frustrating. I think in 2024, especially when you talk about all of these events, you're like, shouldn't it be better? Like, shouldn't you be able to tell me a time that things are going to get better? I mean, I don't know about you, but I know when my power was out, I would check that CenterPoint map. I'm embarrassed to say every 30 seconds, of course. And every single time I checked, it said I had power.
Yep. Energized, but no power coming through.
Exactly.
I know that green energized. I was checking for my dad so much. And by the way, the memes of the map were pretty funny. People are just like going on Microsoft Paint and just drawing colors and go, here's CenterPoint's response. And you can't help but laugh.
I mean, we talk about it being a meme, but it's actually reality. I'm going to have nightmares about that green paint.
Oh my God.
It's brutal.
I hate spam, and I know you do as well. And guess what? Spam starts with your personal data being sold every day. Data brokers collect and sell your personal information to third parties, such as your SSN, address, phone numbers, health and financial records, and much more. These insights are then used by scammers, total strangers, insurance companies, banks, businesses, and even the government to target you with, you guessed it, spam. It's time to protect your data, your time, and your sanity with Incogni. Incogni scrubs your personal info from the web. Simple as that. Incogni takes only 3 minutes to set up, tackles 180 data brokers and people's search sites, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get Incogni today and never look back. Use code CITYCAST for 55% off the annual plan at incogni.com. That's spelled INCOGNI.com. That's incogni.com and use code CITYCAST for 55% off their annual plan. Okay, Pooja, we are going to go to lightning round. I have a lot of stories to cover here. And speaking of the response, one way you shouldn't do this is to approach linemen, okay? This is not going to help. I know a lot of us are hot. We're frustrated because of CenterPoint taking so long to restore power. But can we not threaten and attack the linemen who are here working? Can we show them some respect and gratitude? A lot of them have come here from out of state and are working long hours to get us back online. Charges were filed against 38-year-old Anthony Aloric Leonard, who allegedly pointed a gun at an electric utility worker in Southwest Houston and then threw rocks at them. In another incident, a person banged on a window of a lineman's truck with a pipe. And these actions, by the way, Pooja, are slowing down the work as crews have to be evacuated so there can be an investigation done.
It really is sad. It really is. This is not the Houston that we want to show all of our out-of-town workers or even those who live here. This is not Houston as we know it. However, I get it. And I know you do too. I get it. I'm not in any way excusing what's going on. I'm just saying people are desperate. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that lack of communication that we talked about earlier is playing a huge role into this. My dad and I have driven around Harwin looking for somebody to get just some information. We're not like threatening them like, hey, you got to turn the lights back on, but just, hey, do you have a timeline so we can plan for this accordingly? Because this is impacting everyone. Like, we just want to know when we can tell employees to return, when we can anticipate opening up the store, because we're losing a lot of money in this, right? And I get that part for sure.
I do too. And obviously, I don't know these people, obviously, who have made these threats personally, but we just have to assume that they are just people who are out of their minds at this point. They are just so frustrated. They are so desperate. But like you said, if anything, go the opposite way. Bake some cookies for these guys. Make nice. I have a friend, she was joking with me the other day. She said she was on a dating app and she said she put in there looking for a lineman. So that way, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, let's be as nice as possible to all of these people who are coming in, trying to make our lives better so that they come and do your house.
Oh my God. Usually men on dating apps who run lines get rejected, but in this case,
no way.
This is the new way to pick up women, I guess.
I mean, do you blame them?
Hey, not at all.
Absolutely not, right? Invite them over, you'll cook dinner, you'll do whatever they say, right?
Yeah. And for some more information on this, by the way, Ed Allen, who's the business manager for the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers Local 66 chapter, said, God, stop harassing these people. I mean, they can't even eat lunch without getting heckled at. And there was another incident that prompted concern among CenterPoint officials when there was an apparent threat of a drive-by shooting at a work staging site near Barnett Stadium. Acting Houston Police Chief Larry Satterwhite said the department pleaded with the crews to stay at the site close to where several outages were, but the group moved their operations elsewhere. And Satterwhite said, quote, every time someone does this, it slows things down and hurts us, end quote.
Absolutely. But I mean, again, speaking about this desperation, I know you have probably received photos. I know so many people who have been out there taking photos when they see these big groups of workers just staged in certain areas because they feel like, what are they doing? Why are they there? Why aren't they out there working? And I mean, here's the thing. We don't know.
Yep.
They could have been working for 18 hours. They could be taking a break. They could be eating lunch. They could be doing anything. But I think that the assumption is when you see these people just, waiting it out for a little while is that they're not doing anything. And that really gets people's blood boiling. And we all need to kind of calm down.
We do need to calm down.
Do.
We do. But I get it.
I interviewed a therapist actually the last week just to talk a little bit about how people are feeling. And that's what he said. He's like, listen, people are just so worked up right now. At this point, anything you can do to kind of lower your temperature, to breathe a little bit, maybe, call a friend, get off of social media, do whatever you can to just relax a little bit.
Pooja, I'm trying to call a friend, but there's outages on my network too. It's just making me more mad.
Well, I should also tell you that when I went to go interview this therapist to talk about how people are doing, we then got into the elevator and the power went out and we got stuck.
No way. Oh my gosh.
Just for a couple of moments. But it was classic, right? It was like, of course. Of course, this is what happened.
Of course. Hey, on Friday, we talked about the victims from Hurricane Beryl, and that number is now going up. As the Houston Chronicle put it, the number ranges from 9 to 11 deaths, and the newspaper estimates it's currently at 13. But a full count is weeks away because the county agency, the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, has to determine the cause of each death that's potentially storm-related. And that takes time, but we do for sure know that 2 men and a woman died from overheating or hyperthermia due to loss of electricity during and after Beryl, according to KPRC, and a report by the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. 50-year-old Candy York died from hyperthermia and complications, and overheating was also the cause of death for Oscar Hernandez and Charles Richard Anderson, both in their late 70s.
That is so sad. It is so sad to hear about those stories, to cover them. I mean, just imagine how these families are feeling. Because I think that is one of the things when we talk about extreme heat in our area and a loss of power, it isn't just an inconvenience. It really is life-threatening. I mean, it's tragic. It is so sad that so many people are without these resources. And when the power outages are so widespread, it's difficult to find help. It really is, because everybody is going through this at the same time. Yeah,
it's just heartbreaking. Something that could have been avoided. And I think about Winter Storm Uri, right, when there was not enough power on the grid and people died because of that. Something that could have been avoided. Something that's out of their control. Like, you can't even do anything about that, right? I can't even imagine what the families are going through.
I know. I know. I mean, especially for people with like health conditions and things, this heat really is brutal.
Hmm.
And another thing I know we've been reporting about is people are really suffering, and there is, of course, a risk of death with a lot of these portable generators. You got to think about the dangers of carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
We may see more issues with that come up because so many people are using these portable generators. We saw that also during our winter storm. It's just so sad. It truly is.
Pooja, 15 counties were added to the FEMA Individual Disaster Assistance List, and you can now apply at disasterassistance.gov. The counties include Harris, Fort Bend, Montgomery, Galveston, and more. Individuals might be eligible for serious needs assistance, a one-time payment of $750 per household to cover the cost of food, water, baby formula, breastfeeding supplies, medication, and other emergency items, according to a FEMA news release. Displacement assistance will also be made available to cover the cost of housing needs for those unable to return to their homes due to the disaster, and we've linked that information in our show notes. I filled ours out to see if we would qualify for replacing all the food that we had to throw away when we were without power. It takes about 5 minutes. Just have all your information ready. You will need your pre-tax income for this form, so find that before you fill out this form. So just one little note there, and then FEMA will be in touch. I don't know how long that will take. As you mentioned earlier in this episode, look, it could take a while to get some of this money from any of the government-related recovery efforts, but at least fill it out if you do need that assistance.
I'm so glad that you're sharing this information because that's the big thing I feel like we really need to get across, even for people who feel like, oh, it wasn't that bad for me. I only lost power for a few days. Get the assistance if you can. Yeah. Apply. Even if it's your refrigerator, anything it is that you can get, you might as well, apply for this, see what happens. Yep. Because this really is a financial liability.
Hey, one last thing, listeners, you're probably thinking, hey, y'all didn't talk about the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Well, if you want to hear more about it, check out CityCast Pittsburgh's episode on the attempted assassination, including eyewitness accounts. That is linked in our show notes. Okay, Pooja, before we get out of here, usually this part of the podcast we would do only in H-Town, but today we're going to remember longtime Houston Chronicle and Culture Map columnist, Houston radio host, and most importantly, my friend, Ken Hoffman. Ken suddenly passed away Sunday morning at his lake house in Conroe, and I've known Hoffy for 17 years. We actually met when we both started working at a startup sports radio station called 1560 The Game in 2007. And on the first day of his new show, the Ken Hoffman Show, he was about to go on air. He had nobody to talk to, so he sees me. I'm an entry-level reporter who just graduated the University of Texas, and he goes, hey, can you just come in here and talk with me because there's nobody else? And we started talking. I don't know what we talked about, and he told the story so much, and this is true. After the first segment, he leans over and he goes, hey, what's your name? And that's how we met. And from that moment forward, we became family. He treated me like a son. We shared so many laughs, so many meals and memories. And I would talk to him almost every single day. And I'll always remember him for his wit, his sarcasm, his love for the Beatles, and our personal favorite, wrestling. So many Houstonians enjoyed his work with the Houston Chronicle. His column was incredibly popular because of his relaxed style of writing, sharp take on every subject, and of course, his fast food reviews. That's what everybody knew him for, and I'm going to miss him. I know a lot of Houstonians are. Ken leaves behind his son, Andrew, and his wife, Erin. It's still surreal. I mean, it happened Sunday morning, and I still can't believe it that he's gone.
What a huge loss for Houston. I mean, I know I did not know him personally, although we had emailed a few times. He actually featured me in a story many years ago, and my dad still has probably 100 copies of that story. Just because, I mean, what a great guy. Truly, there was nobody else like him.
We would talk about you. He would call me and be like, hey, that Pooja, she's good. I like her.
Oh.
I like her. He would always say that about people he
Aw.
liked. She's good. I like her, or I like him. And he was so gracious with his column. He would talk about subjects that wouldn't get the coverage in the mainstream media. And he was so cool with it, whether it be adoption events or independent wrestling circuit events. Like, he would just talk about everything. He would always give shout outs to people. I was going back and just reading all the times he wrote about me in my column, whether it be when my daughter Hayden was born and he had to put a little announcement in, and you've met Hayden. She's the little sweetest girl. And it was just so cool that he would do that in a wildly popular space. It was just so cool.
There is nobody in Houston like him.
No.
Truly. Nobody is going to be able to replace that column and what he did for our city.
We're going to miss you, Hoffy. Thank you so much for all of the memories. And I will apologize to his family now, because I know just out of habit, I'm just going to call him when I'm driving around. And it's going to be something that's going to take a while to break that habit. But man, I will cherish every memory with him. Pooja, thank you so much for joining us. That was the positivity we needed on this Tuesday. I know a lot is going on, and we will recover. It's going to take some time, but I truly appreciate it.
We got this.
That was ABC 13's Pooja Lodhia. All the stories we discussed are linked in our show notes. And before we go, a quick favor. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends or family members. Shoot them a text or an email and just say, hey, you need to listen to CityCast Houston. Thank you. And while you're at it, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, as well. A link to that is in our show notes. That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Hold on, that doesn't make sense. Hold on. Sorry, I messed that up.